This podcast is brought to you by HEC Paris.
Thank you very much. And it was a pleasure to read this paper. And, well, the idea of discussant, in my opinion, is try to find some criticism. And it's not so simple in this paper because it's quite well written, and I had to go to dig into details. But, well, I found a few criticism to give. So, well, there are two very distinct parts in this paper. One is a theoretical part, and Jan King showed one theorem basically during his presentation, and there is a big deal of simulations and empirical studies, and the two things are relatively unconnected. And of course, well, not unconnected totally. Of course, it's the same problem, but it's not so clear the connection between the two. And I will, of course, because of my personal tastes and my limited knowledge in applications, I will rather discuss the theoretical part rather than the empirical or Monte Carlo part. Nevertheless, but the Monte Carlo, well, first small remark, it's a bit frustrating to have a Monte Carlo study which does not satisfy the assumptions of the theorem. Well, there is the question of the drift, which is a very secondary thing, but also the question that the main theorem assumes that the volatility should be bounded, and otherwise it's of course impossible to have exponential bounds if this is not true. And of course the Monte Carlo study is done on classical, like Heston models or something similar, which by definition the volatility cannot be bounded. Of course, in practice, it makes no difference because you can always say, well, I do the simulation and I bound the volatility at some level, and if this level is high enough, well, of course, you will never reach it, so it makes no difference. But still, it's a bit strange. Okay, but that's a very secondary criticism. But I warned you that my criticism were not really very deep, right? The second thing I want to mention is that, well, the Monte Carlo study show two things, or three things. One is that low frequency is always worse than high frequency. Well, this is not really a surprise, I think, but, well, it's good to see, but, well, that's rather natural. There is very little difference between all refresh and pairwise refresh time. That is, if you estimate the covariance or covariation pairwise using all possible refresh times for these two particular assets, or if you use only the refresh time where all assets have been traded and so on. And it makes, in practice, very little difference. What's very surprising to me is that the two-scale estimator is quite significantly better than the realized kernel estimators. And well, by a huge amount, in fact. It's not just comparable and slightly better or worse. No, it's really much better in the out-of-sample simulations. And this is a bit strange because, in principle, in terms of rates of convergence, the realized kernel should be optimal. Maybe not in terms of variance, but in terms of rates of convergence. So what happens, the fact that the estimation is a bit unstable, well, is maybe an explanation, but, well, one would like to understand better why is it that? Or maybe small samples or relatively small samples are the reason. So this I don't really understood from the paper, but well, it's probably a difficult thing. Okay, about the theory, there are always two questions. Yeah? Well, are the results good or relevant or sharp or optimal in some sense? And are the assumptions reasonable? Of course. And the answer is always well, not very clear, because you will always find that the assumptions are too strict and that the results could be maybe improved. Okay, for the first question, the answer is really yes and no. Well, there is a very nice answer, which was already known from previous papers, I think, but is that the dependency in terms, for the rate in terms of the number of assets is logarithmic, and it gives also a rate in terms of the total number of observations, or refresh times, or all refresh times, which is n to the 1/6. Okay, now there are two, well, there are, in my opinion, 2 points where it's not totally satisfactory. One is that the theorems are large deviation type of thing, which involve constants, and those constants are typically huge, of course. So it's good to give a rate. It's not good to give a precise approximation or understanding on what is the real size of the error. Okay, so there should be some, well, distributional result, some convergence in law or things like that, which is probably available relatively simply if you have regular observations. Much more difficult, of course, if you have non-synchronous observation with this refresh time. So this is really very difficult. But at least in the case of regular observation, that should be something available. And as I said before, there is the problem of the kernel estimator, where the rate should in fact be n to 1/4 if you think about the microstructure noise, the presence of the noise. Okay. About the assumptions, so there are a number of conditions. I'm a bit sorry because Yanking didn't show the conditions, so the numbers here will not say anything to you. So there are basically one condition about the drift, which is secondary, and it's not a problem. There is the question of bounded volatility, which is essential for the validity of the theorem, but could be dispensed if you have distributional results. And in practice, it's probably not very important. The condition on the two-scale parameters is technical and could be relaxed, and it's explained in the paper, so it's not a problem. The main problems, in my opinion, are the other conditions about the structure of the noise and the structure of the observations. The noise is additive, and it's not the paper is written with Gaussian noise, but it says, and it's clear that it could be relaxed. But the additivity cannot. Well, not the way the paper is written. And of course, in practice, the very important part of the noise is a rounding effect, and probably there are more structure in the microstructure noise. So this is a very important problem which should be, improved, in my opinion. And the independence of the observation time and the prices and the volatility is also a bit questionable, although less than the first question. But this would be nice to have relaxed assumptions on this particular issue. Okay, well, anyway, I will stop here. And overall, it was a very interesting paper. Thanks a lot.
Yanchin, you want to...
So, Jan, thank you for the nice comment, and I think everything what you said is quite correct, and I certainly completely agree. And this is really version 1. I mean, by one single author alone is not enough. Many things you write here actually could be very well, carried out by any of people here, and let's hope. I mean, for version 1, I just want to show the concept, and then you actually talk a lot of very nice aspect about theory versus application, and I certainly appreciate that, and I know there's a lot of different views. I'm a person maybe on even days, I go to Wall Street, talk to people, or to pharmaceuticals. on all days. I talk with Yon and so on. So I'm always sandwiched by two groups, or Yasin. I mean, I always sandwiched by two groups of people who, on one hand, require one mathematical to be more beautiful. On the other hand, like those hedge funds, they really just want thin to work or prove a concept. And this can be reflected in some of my work here. So I always try to strike a balance because given the limited amount of time I have, but all what you criticize on theory, I completely agree. So we basically just want to write something that using as less math as possible to demonstrate the effect there. So for example, you say a number of times that the volatility is bounded. I was not completely happy with that too. And of course, the only thing I could hope is cheated a little bit by saying that, hey, over finite sample, I mean, of course, that is always finite. But this is certainly a little bit cheating, mathematically unsatisfactory, but practically probably okay. And you were quite rightfully saying, observed that, which I also noticed, that two-scale method is quite better than kernel methods. Anything wrong with our simulation or with the kernel methods? And actually, this is traced back to, that a lot of those complicated programming was not done by me. So my students actually using cross-validation to choose the realized kernel parameters. And very unfortunately, the realized parameter was chosen to be 1. And the student doesn't really report to you that he just carry out and go on further. So that means that it's really serious under smooth. So it worked quite good in sample, but work very bad out sample. I think this is the main reason. I knew the defect, and we were hoping that to change some of those. It was in one of those versions. I have difficult to change that. And then you were talking a lot of like extensions, which you have done a lot of this work along with maybe Per and other people on how to deal with rounding errors, non-additive noise, and all those are very good questions. So hopefully that you can see that the large deviation or concentration type of inequality that we develop in mathematics looks like theoretical. At least through this paper, there's one positive thing out of it is that you could see also have practical implications in portfolio allocation. So I appreciate your comment.
Please visit us at www.agc.edu.